Excellent. So I want to welcome everybody to our session of the laws of attraction, rekindling stakeholder love for sales. These are interesting times, and I want to make sure that everybody today gets a chance and gets to appreciate Rosalind Santa Elena, who's going to be my co-host today. Rosalind, you've made a big change in your life recently. You just founded a new group. Tell us a bit about what's going on in your life.
Yeah, thank you. So super excited to, announce as part of the RevOps Collective, we've just launched our own RevOps community. So really a community focused on RevOps for RevOps by RevOps. And selfishly, it's a place for me to be able to share my experience, but other RevOps leaders and professionals to come together and really focus on revenue operations growth. There's tons of great communities out there for tons of different kinds of learnings, but a smaller community really focused on elevating and accelerating your personal RevOps journey. So I'm super excited about it.
Awesome. And by the way, my name is Sylvain Tremblay. I lead an emotional intelligence business unit within Uniphore. And I've been in the sales world just like you for a very, very long time. I've led field sales organization and virtual sales team. And today, the topic that we're going to be discussing, B2B sales has changed drastically. If you think about what's going on, our sales leader now want to become leaders of sales. Our customers, or 42% of B2B buyers, don't want to talk to a salesperson, right? This is an important stat. So it is really, really important that we figure out ways for sales and to rebuild and build back the bridge or the love between sales and the stakeholders of sales, whether it's on the customer side or on the business side. So that's going to be the topic of the hour. And I encourage everybody that's joining us to ask their questions in the chat room, because Rosalind and I are going to share some topics and discuss. And Rosalind, from your standpoint, what do you see some of the biggest challenges right now, like for our sellers and this entire sales environment?
Yeah. There's so many things. I mean, sales is always such a complex industry and profession as it is. But I think it's even incredibly important now, or even tougher now, not just with the market volatility that we've all experienced, but also buyers, right? I think about myself as a buyer, and buyers are just so much more informed, right? We have information overload, right? We can access any information at any point in time through communities, through just through the network, looking at online, looking at different websites, and we have all this access to information, which makes us informed, but also makes us much more demanding, right? I think we expect this frictionless, seamless experience. And we want to engage sales. As you said, a lot of us don't want to talk to sales until we get to a certain point, right? But when we do talk to sales, we really want that, thought partner, right? We want somebody, I think buyers really want someone who is, not going to sell them a product or a service, but help them solve their challenges, right? Buyers want you to take away their pain, right? Really focus on their pain points and then help them see success, right? Help them achieve and really exceed their own targets and help them. So I think on top of that, I think buyers, not only want that experience and that thought partner and value, but they want to be met where and how and when they want to buy. Right. You think about us as consumers. Sometimes I want to buy in the middle of the night, right? I'll go online and do some shopping, or sometimes I want to go in person to the store, or just drive my car up and have them drop it in my trunk. Right. And so I think there's so many ways for us to purchase that it makes it extremely complex for the seller, right? Because this means that sellers have to adapt their own approaches, their methodologies to really meet their buyers where they want to be met. And this is super challenging because as buyers, we're humans and we have a lot of different preferences. Yeah.
Totally agree
What?
with you. And Rosalind, I think one of the dimension that we forget is there's a lot of noise in the system. All right, our buyers are
Yeah.
constantly bombarded. I remember a few years back was 7 to 9 touches to get a buyer's attention. Then it went to 14 to 21. I was in a conference in Boston before Christmas, and it was like now we're talking 28 to 34. Just think
Yeah.
about the volume. And I think about the recent technology arrival from Chat GPT, where now we're going to produce content like in industrial quantities rapidly. And to the point you made, our customers now, they do a lot of their homework before vendors engage with them. So
Yep.
there's the rational buying journey, but one of the things that people are that I think we're trying to automate sales and make sales a game of analytics, but
Mhm.
there's the entire emotional dimension of sales. And I'd love to poll the audience, and we didn't build a poll for this, but Rosalind, when's the last time you bought something of value from somebody you disliked?
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I've ever done that. And I think that, on one hand, I'm probably a bad example because I pretty much like everyone. There's very few people that I actually can't think of anyone that I don't like, but there definitely is something to be said about that experience, right? Because what I can say is that when I have looked at vendors and I've come down to two different ones that are equal, probably equal in product kind of features and offerings and such, but it's come down to the relationship and that experience with the person, right? I've chosen, to go with one vendor and do business with one salesperson, even if the product maybe wasn't as quite as what we needed versus another, or maybe the pricing was a little bit more expensive, or there were other factors, but simply because you have that relationship, and to your point about that human touch and having that relationship and that trust and that rapport with that person makes all the difference.
Makes the difference. And it's also that person's ability to meet the buyer where they are in their buying journey, both rationally and emotionally, but
Yeah.
also to be contextually relevant. The faster you build, I mean, the science proves it. The more a person feels understood, or a buyer committee feels that this company or this seller understands what our issues, they speak our language, they feel our pain. That is without a doubt, and there's recent studies that show that there's direct correlation between customer sentiment and their propensity to buy. So I wouldn't be surprised for us collectively to see that human aspect of sales becoming more and more of a competitive differentiator as we go in time.
Yeah, 100%. I 100% agree. I think it's that human aspect, right? And being like, people buy from people that they trust, right? And people that they like, they trust, and like to your point, that they feel that they understand their perspective and where they're coming from, and then they see them as that trusted partner to be able to help them achieve their goals and see success.
So, what would be one of your advices on um, how do sales become better at seeing the world from the eyes or the lens of their customers? Because right now, we virtual has become the preferred way of selling. We went like
Yeah.
I built a career meeting people, reading the room, but now the virtual world allows us to scale, to meet a lot more customers faster, more a day. And I mean, there's tremendous benefit of selling remotely. But then how do you read the room? How do you pick up on, what advice would you have for sellers to do their homework on their customers? What do you, how do you see them getting better at that dimension?
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think that to your point, it makes it easier to reach out to more folks because now you're not getting on a plane to go travel somewhere, even driving in your car, getting stuck in traffic, going somewhere to go visit someone, which means that you can have multiple meetings versus maybe just a handful, right? Any given work day. But at the same time, it is more difficult, right, to engage, to build that rapport and those relationships sometimes when you aren't in person, right? I think we've all done a great job of doing that, and by whether by choice or not, we've all had to do that. Um, but it's really about understanding the buyer. And I think we were chatting about this a little bit earlier. I think that companies really need to understand and define that ideal customer profile, right? Who they should be selling to from an account perspective, right? Who really needs your product, and honing in on that. But even equally important or more important is then once you identify those accounts, who are those people, right? Who are those roles, those target personas that really care about your solution, and you need to really understand them and understand, collectively the persona itself, but then also the individual that you are actually having a meeting with or targeting. If you start with the persona, what do they care about? How do they want to engage? What are those challenges that they typically face so that you can craft your messaging and your content to be relevant, right? As you mentioned, and just really being able to reach them where they want to be met, but then always be testing, right? Because that's going to change. Collect feedback, always be testing. And I think in this environment, more than ever before, constantly and frequently assessing, what's working and what's not at a very rapid pace. It's no more of this look at it after a month, look at it after a quarter, because then you're too late, right? Especially in this market, you just don't have the time to waste or to spend on doing the wrong things any longer than you have to.
Absolutely love what you just said. Uh, Vendors or companies need to constantly A B test their messaging, their value proposition, and look at it not from what they want, not their lens, but the lens of their customers and adapt it by persona. The other thing that you're saying is make sure that not only my wife always tells me, don't mansplain it to me. Understand my world, understand my environment. So I love this constant of continuously A/B tests. Don't create a value prop and think it's going to last for the next 2 years. Doesn't work that way, especially in this rapidly changing environment. So love that.
Yeah,
Now, go for
oh,
it.
sorry. I was just gonna add that in addition to, once you've identified that persona, but then, to your point, it's like, then, okay, yes, you can look at, I'm a, RevOps professional, and you have all RevOps professionals, but what matters to one RevOps professional at this point in time is going to be different from another, right? And so when you are targeting those folks, it's that human aspect, right? Understand who they are, what's important to them, what's important at their size and stage of their company at this point in their career, right? There's so many factors that could easily be, come into play to really personalize your outreach to stand out, differently. And from the rest of the noise, as we always talk about, right? Cutting through that noise, because you can reach out to me with a message that might resonate today, but maybe doesn't resonate with me 6 months from now, because that's not a pain that I have anymore.
Absolutely. And the other thing is the solution available to you might be
Mhm.
very different. It's the problem or the potential market options that the customer may have versus your competitive environment. So you also need to be very in tune with the context of the customer themselves, but your competitive landscape as well.
Yeah. Yep.
So continuous. So we started, and I'm going to keep summarizing as we go forward. Say, meet
Yeah.
your customers where they are, both rationally and emotionally, on their buying journey. Then make sure you adapt your content constantly. A/B test your content based on your personas. Now, how how do you see that impacting your sales strategy? Right now, we've been locked in behind doors for a long time, for almost 2 years during COVID.
Mhm.
Right now, people have gone. Some companies have gone back to having feet on the streets. Some companies have said virtual is here to stay. Where do you stand on that, and how do you see these two environments commingle?
Yeah, I think similar to folks kind of working in the office or working remote, I think we're going to see a lot more of a hybrid approach, right? Because now that we've seen how virtual can work in different environments, now it's that testing phase, right? To really understand what works for your industry and for your buyers, right? Again, going back to that kind of, where does your buyer want to be met? How do they want to be engaged? And that could be virtual, it could be in person, and again, it could be, just a hybrid of both. And I think that, companies really need to think about what works for their buyer. as you keep saying, I think you said it a couple times, which really resonates with me, is that from the customer lens. And one thing I think we didn't necessarily touch on specifically, but think about your customers. I mean, there's just a wealth of information there that I think a lot of organizations don't tap into enough, right? The folks that are actually with you, using your product, loving your product, right? And really getting that value, having conversations with them to learn, right? How do they want to engage? What do they see in the market? What do their counterparts see? What are they hearing from the competition? What are the challenges that they're facing? There's so many questions to ask. And what better source of information than someone who's already understood your value prop and is with you on your journey, to be able to talk to them and feed that back into all of your content and collateral and events and such.
I, it's the point you just made is very near and dear to my heart because there's tons of conversations taking place on mediums like we are today. Most companies are dealing, let's face it, even if you have feet on the street, still 63 to 67% of the B2B engagement will be done virtually, if not more. Gartner even says it's going to be north of 80% by 2025. But if you think about that, during the conversations that we're having, like today, or if we would be having, there's a multitude. John Chambers would always say, if you pay attention and you listen to your customers carefully, they will tell you their pain points. They will tell you what they need. You just
Mhm.
have to pick up on the cues. All right. And this is where, and I'd be curious on your thoughts on that. How do you see technology helping companies and the sales organization be better and more agile at picking up those cues or that intelligence that often is missed in those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of great technology out there that can really help pick up some of that, those conversations, the sentiment, right? A lot of those cues that when you're having a conversation from a human aspect, you can pick up sometimes easier in person, right? Because you can read more of the body language and you can kind of read the room a little bit better. But when you're having a conversation virtually, it is, and I know these studies talk about when you do a lot of virtual events or virtual meetings, how it's much more tiring than in person. And I firsthand experienced that the first year of COVID and kind of being shelter in place was like, wow, I'm used to back meetings, but why am I so exhausted, at the end of the day when you do video calls? And it's because you're constantly trying to pick up those cues, right, that you normally cannot. As easily, right, in versus in person. And so I think that there's tons of technology, I think, that can help with some of that sentiment. But I think maybe even before we go there, I think a lot of the to be able to leverage the data, right, and the technology to gather the data. I think that's a
Yes.
huge win, right? Because you're getting, and not just data like firmographic information or names and phone numbers and things like that, but getting the right data about the buying patterns, right? And what's happening. What are people, when they come to your website, what are they doing? What are they clicking on? What's resonating, right? And be able to really gather those insights to understand what your buyers are doing and, again, how they want to be met, right? To purchase, where they want to be met. And so a lot of that data comes from that testing, right? Whether it's your website, your events, your conversations, looking at deal cycles. There's so much great information there to extract. And because there's so much technology available to help you bubble up those insights and gather that information, you can leverage technology to do that versus this manual effort of having reps or people spend, hours of the day just gathering information. I mean, just being able to gather that behavior, look at using the technology to gather that information, and then looking at that and using that for your testing is incredibly powerful. And now with, like you said, the chat and the AI and all this, there's so much technology out there to be able to help remove as much of that art that we talk about and instill as much science. And then there's still the art aspect. And that's where some other technology can help with picking up those emotional cues and that sentiment. Um, and then coupled with training, obviously, for the sales team.
I think all of us, and I'll speak in general, we're all tired of the spam cannon. And,
Yes.
and I think All right, how much more can we get? And with Chat GPT and all that, we will see a plethora of new ways that you're going to get bombarded with information that is going to start to look and feel a lot more personalized, but it's again
Mhm.
going to be automated. But to your point, there's a lot of technology from the digital customer acquisition process. Listen, like observe your customers online. All right, look at their where they're learning. I call them. I think the art is going to be start engaging with your customer during their learning journey, making sure your
Mhm.
message resonates with the personas that. So if you study your ICP, as I call it, well enough, make sure you understand your ICP. You're clear on who they are, what their pain points are, but also what their strategy is, what their industry is moving towards, so you can adapt your content so it's relevant. But then as you engage, make sure you understand how far they've been in that buying journey so you can
Mhm.
connect fast. I think the one of the things that there's still an art to sales, and we often skip steps.
Mhm.
You just need to earn the like validate and earn the right to advance. I always told my sales organization, don't assume, validate and earn the right to move. But in today's world, you got to move rapidly. You got to stay in touch with that customer. They want to move. All right, move at my pace. Some corporations will be here, some will be there, some will be fast. But it's super important, like you said, use the right tools, the right messaging at the right time, and then
Mhm.
sales will be a lot more relevant, and you'll be seen. And I hate to use this cliche, but if you call yourself a trusted advisor, you better be relevant. You better add value to the conversation, to the engagement, because you will be relegated. And this is where the technology, the seller's role will be a lot more important. Leverage the technology to make you better. But when
Mhm.
you engage, make it count. And Rosalind, here's the part that is freakish in this is buyers will have completed 83% of their buying journey before the vendor engaged with them. But what is not spoken is of the remaining 17, they will only spend 5% with a given vendor during their buying journey. So think
Mm.
about that. You got to meet your customer where they are. You've got to understand what they know, what they don't know. Position yourself against the competition, build rapport, build value, all this, and 5% of the sales journey. So, do you believe technology's got a role in helping sellers get better in delivering that
Yeah.
impact in that 5%?
Yeah, absolutely, right? Because if you only have that short that small amount of time with with a prospect and with the buyer, you've got to make it count, right? And to your point, and I think a lot of this technology is what's going to give you the information you need to be able to be armed and, ready for that 5% time.
So, if you had advice for the revenue operations professional, because that's, it's easy for us to share our thoughts with the audience here, but if you had advice for RevOps, how do RevOps help sales rebuild that relationship or that value that they once had in a revenue generation process?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, when we talk about, technology, we've talked about kind of the insights and the data and the testing and all the steps along the entire customer life cycle, all of those touch points. That's where I think, revenue operations professionals can really drive a lot of value by ensuring that the team has the right data, they have the right insights, right? We're bubbling up the right information at the right time to the sales team to be able to continue to iterate and improve their sales process and sales methodologies, but also for marketing, right? To be able to really help marketing understand what content is working, what collateral is working, what's working at top of funnel to improve the resources and tools and messaging and all of the things that the sales team can leverage. Um, in their sales cycle, but also the technology aspect, right? Tech is a huge part now of revenue operations responsibility. And so making sure that you have the right technology that to support your team, and to support the customer, and being able to have that technology help to automate a lot of the information that otherwise would be manual. And that will allow the sales team more time to actually go out and sell and have conversations and do more of the deep thinking around, right, around some of this human aspect versus worrying about gathering information or what piece of content do I use, who should I be talking to, is this the right persona, is this the right person at the right company. And all of that infrastructure is where I think revenue operations, if done right, can really support the team so they can go do the things that a human has to go do, right? That can't be replaced by technology. Um, yeah, so I would definitely say there's a lot of touch points. When you think about even just technology, oftentimes I'm asked, what's the best tech stack? What's the ideal tech stack we should have, right? And of course, it depends, right, on your company and your selling motion and who you sell to. But one of the things that I always recommend is look at your customer journey, right, from top of funnel, whether just interest and when they become a prospect, when they become a customer, and then when they become a repeat customer, right? When they renew or expand with you in a SaaS world, if you look across the customer journey and map out your technology to the points of engagement with your customer, right? And again, always with that customer lens, thinking about how does my customer want to engage with me at the top of the funnel, right? Think about website or content, blogs, events, things like that. How do they want to be supported and contacted? And then you can build the technology to support that, right? And I think always looking at it through, as you mentioned, the customer lens is the most important kind of one piece of advice for everybody, whether you're in sales, marketing, customer success, finance, legal, whatever role you're in. Always having that customer first perspective is so critical.
I I I hosted a roundtable of executive yesterday, and that came up
Mhm.
because first, I mean, in today's world, like the tech stack can be like 100 different tools, and every sales leader, RevOps leader, sales enablement leader that I meet with, the last thing they want is yet another tool. You talk to sales, the last thing they want is yet another tool. And the constant message that I get is if you're going to offer me a tool, take something off my plate.
Mhm.
Make sure that your tool, number one, is frictionless. I think the general characteristic is a lot of times you find the same information in a multitude of tools. People want a tool that is like can fit within the ecosystem of their environment. So
Yep.
frictionless. Sellers, I used to be one, so I'll say it. Sellers are lazy. Don't ask me to do something. Give me something before you ask me to do something. Surface the intelligence. What I loved about what you said is make sure that top of the funnel you surface intelligence so the seller can get better. And I
Mhm.
see a lot of companies investing a lot of money in what I call
Yes.
the top of the funnel. Like,
Yep.
and that is the biggest challenge right now. Customers I'm meeting right now are saying, Sylvain, I'm doing okay in surfacing, which is surprising. But the
Mhm.
worst situation, I've surfaced, but stage three, stage four, I'm not converting. I'm
Yeah.
losing. It's a nosedive in my conversion. So for me, the other part is if you're going to be investing in a tech stack or you're going to be investing in technology, make sure that, like you said, Rosalind, is look at the entire life cycle of the experience. And
Mhm.
how are you helping your sales force be better at converting? All right. And like engaging, monitoring, and doing surfacing what intelligence is needed at the top of the funnel, the middle of the funnel, and the closing aspect. And in today's SaaS world, let's not forget usage metrics and all
Mhm.
the aspect that you can deliver on the promised outcome that your seller proposed at the beginning. Make sure you identify those outcomes that you're selling and sell against them. And then you're going to expand and extend based on that. Because if you don't, most SaaS vendor all know this, your customers are one log out away from
Yep.
never coming back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love the fact that you touched on conversion because that's one of the things that, we talk a lot about top of funnel, top of funnel. Everyone talks about top of funnel. And to your point, lots of money is spent there. But it's about conversion, right? It's not about, the leaky bucket analogy, right? It's like you keep pouring stuff in, but if you have a leaky bucket, it's just all coming back out the other side. So it's all about conversion, and it's not just conversion from from a lead to an opportunity. It's about conversion, about not just closing a deal either, because in SaaS, I mean, the first time the customer signs, that's just the beginning of the journey, ultimately,
yeah,
hopefully, right, if you've done it right. And so conversion of a prospect to a customer, but also continuing to convert them in terms of growth, right, and being able to grow and expand within there, and which means that you have to arm your team with the right information and the right technology to be able to bubble up those insights and that information in an easy, as you said, frictionless way. And I think
yeah.
that's where we can really leverage technology. It's not about buying a shiny new tool, adding another thing to your tech stack that promises to do all these wonderful things. It's about making the job easier and more accurate, but also being able to have those insights that perhaps a human can't do, or it takes them hours to do, pulling data into a
Correct.
spreadsheet and doing, slicing and dicing all different ways for analysis, analyzing that information. But using technology to do that, and then tell us what's the next best action, right? Because I think that's the key takeaway. I love talking about conversion, and I love talking about actionable insights, right? Because we could have lots of data, but not be able to, if you're not going to, if you don't know what to do with it, or you're not taking that next step based on the data, then it's not useful at all.
Abs- totally agree. And don't make sure that your next actionable insight, all right, is precise. Because don't
Hmm.
tell me to boil the ocean. It's like the more relevant it is at this point in time in the sales journey, the better we're
Yeah.
off. At this
Yeah.
point, I see let's look at the chat room. Any question from the audience? I always like to, like, right now, you and I are having a great conversation, but any topics from our audience out there?
It looks like Todd asked, oh, he says, I've noticed persona as a filter to use in B2B databases as of lately. Yeah, definitely. And more, and surprising if we're not using that, right? A lot of times it's in the past, I think maybe it wasn't called persona, it was just kind of the roles or the position, right? And then you'd have to filter by all of that. But definitely persona is so, so important.
And the other part is, as you're addressing a buying committee, making sure that you're paying attention to all the personas that you have on that committee. They might not be equally
Yeah,
engaged at all time, but that person that is there, all right, like, make sure that they are engaged, that they understand, because everybody on that committee plays a role, but anybody at any point in time can say no. And
that's
that's the
right.
part I feel sometimes we sell to a buyer, but we forget the buying committee as a whole. Don't lose sight of the buying committee and make sure you address their careabouts as you engage with them.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk a lot about, surround sound. And I think in a sales cycle, especially, as you move up market, that it's very complex. There's multiple stakeholders involved, but it's so easy that, to skip steps again, and that's where it's really important that we are focused, especially in this market, right? Where budgets are tightened or even eliminated. Now you've got to get to the CFO. You've got to get to, there's multiple folks that you need to basically win over and help them understand why this is important for their business and why they should care as well.
And you make an interesting point. It's not only the personas like this, but the level of attention that they command. Like, I would always say, like, if you're dealing with the CFO of a $10 million company versus a 100 million versus a billion, your
Hmm.
talk track needs to be very different, because you need to impact at least 5 to 10% of their business to get
Hmm.
their attention. If you're not, everybody's like super busy in today's world. Everybody acts a bit like a squirrel. All right, got this, got that. So your value prop needs to be bigger than just, like, hit their radar screen and make sure that you have an impact on their overall business. If not short term, not anything longer than medium term, because you won't get much attention.
Yeah.
From
Yeah.
your, go ahead,
Oh,
Roslyn.
I was just
Sorry.
going to say one of the things that we talked a little bit about, and I don't know if I got your perspective on it, but I'd love to hear, kind of, especially given your background and sort of this EQ that we were talking about earlier, but around this
Yep.
customer sentiment and just around, you know, are there things that you've seen? And I think this would be helpful in this conversation. Are there things that you've seen that have really helped your sales team or others or your customer sales teams really hone in on that conversation, right? We talked about the 5% of engagement. Like, how do they do better? Like, do you have advice for that? I'd love to hear that,
Yeah.
actually.
So it's on. I would say it's on probably three fronts. Number one, as we've talked at the beginning of this conversation, meeting your customer where they are in their buying journey. So
Yeah.
this is like, I call it read the room or read your virtual room. The faster you can understand and earn that right of it in advance. There's technology out there that does it in real time, measures your customers' engagement and sentiment from visual, tonal, and verbal, because a
Hmm.
lot of technology today looks at what you said but loses the context, doesn't have the
Mm.
human dimension. So that first part, so it helps the seller in real time adjust. Is my audience engaged? Are they positive? If not, adjust your message, re-engage your audience. It's really using the technology to augment your capacity as a seller, because when you're talking to the green dot, you need to make sure that everybody in that buying committee is
Yeah.
engaged and positive. The reason why that is important is, number one, there's a direct correlation between customers' sentiment and their propensity to buy.
Hmm.
So as you go through your sales journey, you need to make sure, the buyer's journey, you need to make sure your customers remain engaged and positive. And
Hmm.
if you get distractors, and I was on the phone with a former colleague of mine this morning, and she was saying, Sylvain, all this technology allows us to scale and do a lot of things. But the one thing I ask my sellers, if you feel that a customer gets negative or you lose them, if they're within a 90-minute window from your office,
Hmm.
jump in your car and go break bread.
Hmm.
That human element today is still very present. So that's number one. Number two, it's about picking up the cues. And I talk a lot about the cues that that buying committee there, they all have their interests, and if you fail, as I said earlier, they all have a vote, and if you lose
Yeah.
that vote, all right. And Salesforce did a study back at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, where they identified that 70% of lost opportunities were associated to missed cues during the buying
Mm.
process. So the more you're informed about what the customer cares about, when they care about, so you meet them where they are, you capture their language. And number three is about the messaging, like you said.
Mm.
The ability to always look at the customer and A/B test in real time, that is priceless, because you
Yeah.
know what content resonates to which persona. And then you can also accelerate the onboarding of your sellers, because now you know what resonates, you know what
Hmm.
message resonates with your industry, your vertical, your persona, and can adjust and get your sales force to be relevant and productive a lot faster. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
yeah, I love that. I love that. And I love the way you break it down too, because it's otherwise it's so complex, right? If I'm a new seller just coming in and trying to sell, there's so many things I need to think about, right? When I'm having this conversation. So being able to have, in the past we used to have, when we talk about CPQ and all of that, we talk about guided selling, and this is like real-time guided selling, right? But
Yep.
conversational and on the phone, because you just have such a short window to win over multiple people that come with different agendas. And again, there's so much noise out there and they're bombarded with so much information. So you really need to be laser focused on, cutting to the chase, getting to the point, making sure that what you're saying is resonating. And if it's not, as you mentioned, quickly pivot to something that will. And it's difficult.
I,
It's definitely something challenging.
I love it. And for the record, it's not a one size fits all,
Hmm.
because guided selling, there are markets, there are segments, there are situations where guided selling makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
But in complex B2B, multiple engagements, sales
Yep.
teams, guided selling to date has been challenged, and I've
Mhm.
tried to force it on prior sales organization. It was not received well,
Yeah.
but there's a segment for that. And like I think any technology, it's don't peanut butter spread it. Make sure that you bring, especially when I look at sales enablement and rev ops, make sure it addresses your sales organization and their audience as well.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I love that. Love that.
Cool. Let's look at our right hand side here.
Any other questions here?
So I see time flying. So Rosalind, if I was to ask you, and if you had to give advice to the folks that are on this call, this is a complex world. Technology is changing super rapidly. Our customers are evolving. Some of them don't want to talk to sales anymore.
Yeah.
What advice would you say to a revenue ops leader or a sales leader? Where do they start? Where do they invest? And when do they do it?
Yeah, I think it's always that it depends answer for every company because like you said, it's never one size fits all. And so what is going to work and have the most impact for one organization is going to be very different from another. But I think from a approach or methodology perspective, right? You always start with kind of what is your current state, right? And look at where do you want to go, right? What are those goals and objectives that you have? And then you figure out where the gaps are, right? It's not rocket science, but it's more of a, help me understand where is it that I want to go, where am I today, and what's preventing me, right? What are those blockers or challenges that I have that are preventing me from hitting my goals? What are those pain points, right? What's causing the issues with me not being able to reach my goals, and then be able to prioritize from there in terms of what's going to have the biggest impact to helping me achieve those goals, and figure out, that's kind of your prioritization to go figure out, to go tackle those things first. And sometimes that answer, when you come down to where those biggest gaps are, sometimes it's process, a lot of times it's process, sometimes it's training or enablement, right, is an answer. A lot of times it's, rules of engagement, it's policies, it could be technology to help, if things are running, if you have a really good process, that's where I think technology helps to optimize and accelerate, right, what you're doing, because that's where you get the automation, you get integration, you save time, you get those insights that, again, humans may not be able to bubble up as quickly. And so I think there's lots of different answers to be able to solve your problems. But it really depends on what is your biggest gap that's going to bring you the biggest outcome and biggest impact to you reaching your goals, and then hone in there, right, and focus in on that.
I would applaud that. And I will double down on one thing you said. Technology will not fix a bad process.
That's right.
You need to start with your buying journey or your sales. I would say start with your buying journey, understand your market, understand the process. But the one thing that I would add to what you said, is don't wait.
Yeah.
Start now. I've seen customers wait and wait and wait, and now they get caught. And if they wait, uh, they lose the opportunity to pivot and
Mhm.
capture the market, and then they find themselves in a losing situation. So at this point, if we
Yeah.
have no question, I'd love to wrap it up. Any closing comments, Rosalind, before we let our audience go?
No, I just think that, I mean, thank you for the time and the conversation. I thought it was great, and just being able to kind of share, because I do think it's a very, very challenging time for sales right now. Because again, buyers are so informed and so demanding. So I think but good news is there's a lot of great, resources and great approaches to go help our sellers be better at engaging their prospects and building those relationships. So yeah, thank you for the time.
Love it. Rosalind, a big thank you. Thank you to the people that joined us. And if I do a quick recap, we started by there's a lot of noise. We need to meet our customers where they are on their buying journey, both emotionally and both rationally and emotionally. Number two, we talked about always be testing your content, A/B test, A/B test, A/B test. Uh, have the right tools, make sure that you are measuring and quantifying. And it's not about having more tools, it's having the right ones and making sure they surface the intelligence to your sellers.
Yeah.
And last but not least, start with the process. Don't jump in it. Technology doesn't fix a bad process. So a big
That's
thank
right.
you. Thanks for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you soon. Appreciate it.